I have a question for you. Have you ever stood in your kitchen surrounded by food but couldn't eat any of it? Have you ever sat at a restaurant watching everyone else enjoy their meals? Well, maybe you just pick out a plain salad. Maybe have you ever Googled, is blank AIP compliant so many times that you've lost count? If you're nodding your head right now, you might be a thyroid thriver or an autoimmune thriver who understands that elimination diets like the autoimmune protocol are one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox. And the truth is, while AIP can offer us some really powerful healing, it can also be really tough. If you've ever considered trying the autoimmune protocol, but maybe felt just overwhelmed by the thought of eliminating so many foods at once, or if you've been there, done that, and can relate to the struggle, this episode is for you. I'm calling it the AIP Diaries: Lessons, Pitfalls, and Must-Know Tips for Your Adventures in the Autoimmune Protocol. I'll be sharing the unfiltered truth about my journey with the AIP diet, the good, the bad, and yes, even the ugly crying in the pantry moments. As it turns out, healing doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. And even if this is the first time you've ever heard of the autoimmune protocol, stick around because this is a topic and a healing tool that needs to be on your radar. Hello, Thyroid Thrivers, and welcome back to another episode of the Thyroid-Healthy Bites podcast, with bi-weekly episodes dedicated to helping you eat well, live well, and feel well. I'm Ginny Mahar, a functional medicine health coach, cordon bleu chef, and your thyroid health and cooking coach. So if you're ready to get inspired, informed, and empowered with thyroid-friendly food and lifestyle topics, expert interviews, and tales from the healing journey, you're in the right place, friend. Let's dig in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Thyroid Healthy Bites. So today's episode is all about one of the most powerful and honestly one of the most misunderstood tools in our healing toolkit, the AIP diet. A quick heads up, next week I'm going to be releasing a new YouTube video called The AIP Diet Explained, how it works and how to start. This is going to be just a quick 15-minute basic overview of the AIP. So that video is going to be perfect if you're brand new to the concept of the autoimmune protocol, or maybe just need a refresher on the basics. So stay tuned for that to come out on the Hypothyroid Chef YouTube channel. That's coming out May 29th, 2025. So I'll put the link to my YouTube channel in the show notes for you so that you can get that link and subscribe and get notified when my new YouTube videos drop. And while we're on the topic, I'll mention this just in case you didn't know. I drop new video content on my YouTube channel pretty much every week. So if you're a fan of the Thyroid-Healthy Bites podcast, you can also catch those episodes as they come out every other week on the Hypothyroid Chef YouTube channel. So you can watch the video version there. But I also have a dedicated YouTube show, the Hypothyroid Chef Show, which comes out every alternate week. And that's where we're usually just hanging out in my kitchen. We're preparing thyroid-friendly recipes. We're talking about ingredients, thyroid healthy living, and topics like today's topic, the autoimmune protocol. So I actually drop new content every week, and it alternates between the Thyroid Healthy Bites podcast and then the Hypothyroid Chef YouTube show, just in case you didn't know. So yeah, next week, stay tuned for that shorter YouTube video on the basics of AIP. Today, what we're going to do is dive deeper, quite a bit deeper. I'm pulling back the curtain on my real unfiltered experience with the autoimmune protocol. I'm going to share with you how I've survived not one, but three. And actually, I'm just about to get started on my fourth round of elimination phase AIP in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to be an open book with you today and tell you all about the wins I experienced, the absolute struggles I've faced, and the surprising lessons I've learned that nobody really talks about. After that, we are going to get into my top 10 AIP survival tips. So that's right, I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'm going to make sure that you leave today's episode learning from my mistakes so that your experience with the AIP is better and smoother and easier and more successful than some of my earlier experiences were. So if you've been wondering maybe if AIP is right for you, or how the heck do you actually do it without losing your mind, or your social life, today's episode is definitely for you. And just a heads up, I'm not holding anything back. This is the real deal conversation that I wish someone had had with me before I jumped in. So grab your tea, settle in. Let's dig into the messy, beautiful world of healing with AIP. Just in case you might be new here, let's start with just some super quick basics. The AIP, or Autoimmune Protocol, this is essentially an elimination and reintroduction diet. It's designed to reduce inflammation, heal the gut, and calm an overactive immune system, which is often the case for those of us with autoimmunity. So for those of us with Hashimoto's or other autoimmune conditions, AIP can be an absolute game changer. The protocol itself was developed by Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, also known as the Paleo Mom, and it builds on the paleo diet framework, but it does take it several steps further by removing additional inflammatory foods that might trigger immune responses in some individuals. Now, I've actually done the AIP multiple times, as I've mentioned over the years. The first time was right at the start of my healing journey back in 2015. I had been on thyroid medication for hypothyroidism for 4 years, but I had really hit rock bottom with my health because even though my labs were normal, I still had this persistent brain fog, joint pain, tons of fatigue, lots of illness, from laryngitis to strep to tonsillitis, ear infections, headaches that would last for weeks. I was really struggling. So I finally decided to bite the bullet and pay out of pocket to see a naturopath. And when I saw her, we did a bunch of testing. And in addition to some nutrient deficiencies, she found that I had some gut dysbiosis going on, or an overgrowth of bad gut flora. So she suggested giving AIP a try. And honestly, I was really intimidated. I was like, wait, no eggs, no grains, no tomatoes, no chocolate. Like, it sounded impossible. But I was desperate enough, especially at that point, to try anything that might help. And you know what? It did help. I really almost immediately felt better. Like, so much inflammation just turned off and my energy turned on. And this was after years of having super low energy. Now, fast forward to my second round of AIP, which was about 2 years later. I had been feeling great for a while, but then I started noticing like my antibodies were creeping up. I was getting more fatigued. My symptoms were kind of coming back. My hair was shedding more once again. That familiar inflammation was creeping back in. So my body was sending me some signals that something was off. So I decided to go back to basics, back to what worked. And once again, I did some gut health testing and found out that I was dealing with more gut dysbiosis. This is a very common cycle that we thyroid thrivers often find ourselves in because we are far more prone to gut health issues. Now, this time, candida was one of my big problems, and we really needed to go after the biofilms to eradicate the candida. That's kind of a topic for a different episode, but that involves some pretty intense herbs, some binders to help like draw the die-off byproducts out of my body and prevent those symptoms. But also AIP was a big part of my doctor's prescribed protocol. So I was on the elimination phase of AIP for about 3 months that time. And I also took an entire year off of alcohol. Now, these days I keep alcohol to a minimum. I still enjoy it occasionally, but at the time that was the longest I had gone with zero alcohol for an entire 12 plus months. And oh my gosh, I have to say it fixed so many things in my body, including my candida overgrowth. But AIP was also a huge part of that treatment plan. Now, more recently, I've had a bit of an antibody roller coaster again, and 4 separate doctors, both conventional and holistic doctors, have suggested to me that it's probably related to COVID, either contracting the virus or getting the vaccine, both of which can spark autoimmunity in some individuals. And that's been a couple years of ups and downs. I did another stint on elimination phase AIP and just like really dialed up all of my anti-inflammatory food and lifestyle choices. And I got my antibodies down. And then once again, boom, I contracted COVID. And it was such a huge bummer, not only because I had worked so hard to get my TPO antibodies back under control with food and lifestyle, but because it happened like a week before this family spring break trip to Roatan, Honduras, where we had been like planning and preparing for months. It was a dive trip, and we got our son certified to dive. My husband and I got recertified to dive. We were so excited. And then the week before our trip, we went down to Midway, Utah to this is bizarre. A little side tangent here. We'll go on together, but we went to this geothermal crater where the water's like 93 degrees to do our final open water dives. And we all ended up with COVID the week before the trip and had to cancel the whole thing. It was a huge bummer. And the good news is that we just had a redo this past March. It was amazing. It was everything we hoped and dreamed it would be. And when I went down there, like this past March, I was like, wow, my gut feels amazing. My antibodies are going back down. Like they're back to like basically my normal range. And I could almost just like feel it because I just felt like, wow, I just feel better. I feel good. My gut health is good. I'm good. My mood is good. My digestion's good. My energy is good. But lo and behold, and this is the journey, right? I picked up some kind of intestinal bug on the trip. So back to my naturopath, I went last month for another GI map, which is one of the most comprehensive gut health tests there is. And now I'm just about to meet with her again to make a plan for another intensive gut health reset. And I have a pretty good feeling it's going to include my fourth round of elimination phase AIP. So it really, autoimmunity, antibodies, inflammation, gut health, all those things. This is kind of what AIP is really where it can really excel for some people. Honestly, each time I've done AIP, I feel like I have just walked away with more clarity about what foods my body truly thrives on, and then also clarity on what I need to steer clear of to feel my best. But let me tell you something that most AIP resources aren't going to tell you up front. It's hard. Okay, this diet is strict, like seriously strict. We're talking no grains, no legumes, no dairy, no eggs, nightshades, which means saying goodbye to tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplant, chilies, no nuts or seeds, no coffee, no chocolate. I could keep going, but the list is longer, but you get the picture. The list of no's is long. And that obviously it's going to feel overwhelming. It is overwhelming, but there's also a reason for these dietary eliminations, and understanding the why behind it all was really crucial for me to stick with it. For example, nightshades, they contain compounds called alkaloids, and for some people that can increase intestinal permeability or leaky gut in some people. Eggs are another food, particularly the whites can contain proteins that can be problematic for some people. Now, that doesn't mean all people are sensitive to those things or have to eliminate them forever. The point is that they can be triggers for inflammation, for autoimmunity, and for gut health issues like dysbiosis or leaky gut in sensitive individuals. And while all of this might sound like just food science mumbo jumbo, the distinctions really mattered for my personal healing. I really discovered through when I was able to do careful reintroductions, for example, that eggs are a major trigger for stomach pain for me. And you know what? I can have some eggs. I just can't eat a lot of eggs. And eating a lot of eggs for breakfast, as it turns out, is pretty easy to do when you're gluten and dairy free. Maybe some of you are nodding your heads out there. That's a really easy thing that can happen when you cut out a lot of those traditional breakfast foods is, oh, well, I'll just eat, eggs all the time. And eggs have a lot of very healthy qualities to them. But for me, I was leaning on them too heavily, and it was giving me like some pretty serious stomach pains. I had to have endoscopy. I had multiple procedures done trying to figure out what was going on, and really got no answers until I, through AIP, cut eggs out and went, oh, all that stomach pain just went away. So, and again, it's like I can use eggs, I can eat eggs, I can enjoy eggs. I'm just not going to do it 2, 3, 4 times a week anymore. So that's really powerful awareness. That's really powerful knowledge for my healing journey and everyone who embarks on this journey. That's the goal and the hope, and I think a very reasonable expectation that you'll walk away with some really like just solid gold nuggets of nutritional, like bio individual nutritional information that you need. I also pretty much every time I've done elimination phase AIP, I have been amazed at like how much less pain I have throughout my body. And usually it's right away. I will drop a few pounds right away in just inflammation weight. And, just because of the inflammation, it's not AIP isn't a weight loss diet. But here's what I want to emphasize. AIP it's not just about removing foods. It's also about adding in the good stuff, the nutrient dense foods that are going to support healing, support your health and energy, support the gut. Things like bone broth, organ meats, which are incredibly nutrient dense, though I totally understand if that's not your thing. Seafood, fermented foods, lots of veggies. The goal of AIP isn't just restriction for restriction's sake. It's about creating an environment where your body can calm down and reset and heal. And then through those like methodical reintroductions, that's where you can discover your personal food blueprint, which is like the pinnacle of personalized nutrition. And that's amazing. That is like priceless knowledge to have. So AIP helps you find your way to that, to the diet that helps you thrive. Now, that said, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. AIP is tough. It's really tough. And that's what I want to dig into in the next part of today's show is just the real challenges that I face and that maybe you've faced if you've ever done it or if you're about to embark on it, some of the challenges that you will face. I want you to be prepared going in so that you're set up for success because this isn't just a simple diet change or something to be taken lightly. It's a pretty major overhaul to most people's current way of eating. So let's get really honest here. We've already established that AIP is tough. And I think sometimes in the health and wellness space, what we see are these amazing before and after stories, the side by side picture, right? What's between those two pictures? That's what we don't see. But it's easy to see that and think, oh, they just followed this diet and then everything got better and it was solved and they're healed and they're cured. And what we're not seeing in that picture, what we rarely hear about is the messy middle, the day-to-day reality of what it actually takes to get from before to after or from point A to point B. So let me paint you a picture of what that looks like in real life. So with AIP, first of all, there's just the sheer logistics of it all. You're cutting out a lot of foods that probably make up a significant portion of your diet right now. And that means relearning how to cook, how to meal plan, shop, socialize. It means reading every single label. It means calling the restaurant ahead of time if you're going to go out. And sometimes it means bringing your own food to gatherings. I have a lot of resources on the Hypothyroid Chef blog, tons of AIP recipes. I'll be sure and include a link for that in the show notes to my AIP recipe collection on the blog. But I've also got an article in there that I'll link to on traveling. Like, how do you travel with dietary restrictions? And, it kind of depends. Like, for some of us, we might just be gluten-free or gluten and dairy-free. Some of us might be paleo. Some of us might be on like some kind of personalized approach. A lot of us are. If you have to be on AIP and you're traveling, you really need to be able to either bring your own food or prepare food at your destination. Like there is no going through the drive-through on AIP. There's no running into the gas station and grabbing something to eat, right? And that's not always a possibility, right? So there's the logistics, but I think what a lot of people don't expect is also the emotional side of that. I remember the first time I did AIP, like I really drastically underestimated that. I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to go out to a restaurant or go to a party until all of a sudden so many of my like food choices were just off the table, literally. I also, when I do AIP, as I've said, I've done it a few times now. I also usually will experience a little bit of um, what I would describe as withdrawal-like symptoms at first. Maybe some headaches, some fatigue, some cravings for the first week or so, especially, and emotionally feeling deprived. Like it's really easy in that space to feel like everyone else gets to eat whatever they want, and here I am stuck with like my sad little container of compliant food at the gathering or whatever. I mean, you can't even have like a flavored mineral water because most of those flavors are chemical additives, and you are temporarily at least cutting all those out. And that can also lead to some social isolation. Food is very deeply tied to our social connections, our family dinners, coffee dates, happy hours, holiday gatherings. Think about it. So much of how we connect with others revolves around sharing food and drinks. This is why, the ultimate goal is helping you get back to food freedom, right? But when you can't, when you're in that elimination phase, which serves a purpose and is temporary, it can be really isolating. I remember going to a friend's birthday dinner during my first round of AIP, and I had called the restaurant ahead of time and confirmed they could make me like a simple protein and vegetable meal. And I thought, great, I'm prepared. It's going to be fine. But then I get there and everyone's ordering appetizers and passing plates around and clinking glasses for toasts and enjoying wine. And I'm there with my special order, which, was pretty plain, to be honest, and just feeling like I felt like I was watching the party from outside a window. Even at home, it can be challenging. And my husband is supportive and he loves to cook. He's happy to eat pretty much whatever I make, and we both cook together most nights, and he, can easily like make dinner on his own and does so many nights, which is really nice. But he wasn't doing AIP with me. And so our usual routine just gets really disrupted. And then he would get really frustrated that like he'd add black pepper to something and be like, "Oh, can you have that?" And it's like, "No, I can't." And so I can no longer eat that because I'm committed to this. And to get the clear results that I want to get from this, I can't have that. So, it can be tough. When I'm on AIP, I do sometimes end up cooking separate meals. What I really try to help people do via all my hypothyroid chef content and in the Thrivers Club as well is let's figure out a way, especially if you're cooking for a family, let's, get creative about figuring out things you can make where maybe instead of cooking separate meals, you can cook something with maybe separate components where it can just be customized a little bit because nobody wants to cook two dinners every night, right? But on AIP, I now go into it, with enough experience and wisdom to know that sometimes I am going to need to cook separate meals. And sometimes I am going to be surrounded by foods that I can't have. I go into it knowing that I'm going to be spending way more time in the kitchen than I normally would. And I love to cook, but AIP, it's a lot of cooking. And remember, I've got my top 10 AIP survival tips coming your way here in just a minute. So we're not just here to talk about how hard AIP is, but here's the thing. If you're going to succeed at AIP, it's going to take more than just willpower alone. We need to be ready. We need to know that this isn't just something you do willy-nilly. We need to remember that elimination phase AIP is not meant to be forever. And we need to have a plan. Because, and if you've been with me a while, you know this about me. I'm going to give you the truth. I'm not here to blow smoke or sell false promises. I'm here to help you succeed at reaching your goals so that you can feel better. And if you're going to do the AIP, do it. It's powerful. You will learn a ton. The chances are that the likelihood is that you are going to feel so much better. And some people even, they can and have, some people can even reverse like their Hashimoto's. But to succeed at it, you do need to be ready. You need to have your game face on because the truth is that there is a heavy mental lift. I just want to get this all out on the table and talk about it. I want to talk about that mental lift for a second. The planning, the prep, the constant vigilance about ingredient lists and label reading and finding recipes that don't suck. It's work, you know? It's easy and normal on AIP to get tired of cooking. I want you to know that. It's easy and normal to get tired of doing dishes, tired of trying to explain your diet to everyone who asks why you're not eating the birthday cake or having a glass of wine. And there can be this implication that, well, you look fine to me. I don't get it. It's like, it's like, how much time do you have for me to explain this? Because I've got an in-depth workshop on this in my Thrivers Club community that's about an hour long. And I can guarantee that most people at the party aren't that interested unless they're living with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's or like an autoimmune disease. Most people just aren't going to care enough to really want to understand how this process works. So while we're pausing here to acknowledge these challenges, let's just be clear that there are many challenges to AIP. But perhaps I think the biggest challenge comes during the reintroduction phase. Now, this is where you systematically reintroduce as many foods as possible, one at a time, with 3 to 5 days between each new reintroduction. Even if you're only going to be on the elimination phase of AIP for a few weeks, by the time you get through all the reintroductions, you're looking at a process that lasts a couple months at minimum. My first time around, I made so many mistakes with this. We were remodeling our kitchen, and I had been cooking on a hot plate on the workbench in our garage and doing dishes in the laundry room sink for months. It really was not an ideal way to embark on the autoimmune protocol for the first time, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. My doctor had recommended that I do 30 days on the elimination phase before starting reintroduction. So I had that like finish line in my head. It's only 30 days. It's only 30 days. But it's not, right? Because reintroductions. So when that 30 days was up, what I ended up doing is rushing through reintroductions because I was impatient and I didn't have my mental game in place. I wasn't prepared for the reintroductions part. And I was honestly just tired of the struggle. I wanted to expand my diet again. I wanted to be able to go out to eat again. I introduced multiple foods at once, and I didn't stick to the recommended waiting period between introductions. And you know what happened? I ended up having some reactions to foods and not having any idea what caused those reactions. Was it eggs? Was it tomatoes? Was it white rice? Was it potatoes? Who knows? I had no idea which one was the culprit because I basically went back to eating everything except gluten and dairy like within a few days. So I really blew the reintroduction process, which was incredibly frustrating because I wanted to know which foods were causing which symptoms in my body. And now to get to those answers, it meant starting the whole thing over again. So I really learned the hard way that first time around that rushing the reintroduction phase only leads to confusion and missed opportunities to really just truly understand your body's unique needs. This is another good reason why I want you to be ready. I want you to have a game plan. I want you to have support and trackers and tools. And this is like all the things I provide in my Thrivers Club. I give those things to my members when they're embarking on AIP so that they can get, or any elimination diet, so that they can get the most out of their experiment. And that's the truth. AIP isn't just a diet. It really is a full-on personal experiment in getting to know your body and its nutritional needs and sensitivities on a deeper level. It requires patience. It requires mindfulness. It requires a whole lot of compassion, both for your body and for yourself. And that's something I really want to underscore here is that self-compassion is essential on the AIP journey because you will have hard days. You might even cheat. You might make mistakes. I know I certainly have pretty much every time I've done it. There's always been, times where it's like, oops, or, well, I just chose to have that. But what is it going to help to beat up on myself? Being harsh with yourself when you make those mistakes, or maybe even accidentally, eat something you didn't realize you were eating, it just doesn't help the healing process. Actually, it can really do the opposite and create a lot more stress and inflammation. So if you take nothing else away from this segment of the show, just remember this: AIP is challenging and that's normal. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean you're not strong enough. It just means you're human. And healing is within your grasp. But you have to be ready for the fact that it is also hard work. Okay. Let's get to the good news. I know I'm ready. Maybe you are too. There are a lot of strategies that can make this journey a whole lot easier and more successful. That's what I'm most excited to share with you today. So let's shift gears and get into my top 10 AIP survival tips for making this doable, sustainable, and ultimately successful. Hey, Thyroid Thrivers, Jenny here. I just want to pop in with a real quick message. If you're listening to today's show and thinking, I want to get started with this, I want to feel better, I need support, and that is my missing piece, I've got good news for you. I have created the group health coaching membership for Thyroid Thrivers just like you. It's called the Thrivers Club, and you can learn more about it at hypothyroidchef.com/membership. When you become a Thrivers Club member, you get access to me, your personal on-demand health and cooking coach, a full recipe library of thyroid-friendly recipes, including gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo, and AIP recipes. You get access to an amazing, positive, healing-focused community of other thyroid thrivers who get it and who know what it's like to face the unique challenges that we face. You also get access to loads of expert resources created not just by me, but by other thyroid experts, doctors, nutritionists, all kinds of brilliant minds in the thyroid space. And one of the best parts about the Thrivers Club, and really where the results happen for people, is that you get access as a member to our monthly wellness challenges. And those wellness challenges just provide extra inspiration and motivation to make those small but mighty steps that get us where we want to be on our healing journey. Let's find out what happens when you have that support that you need. I'd love to welcome you to the Thrivers Club. If you'd like to know more, you can go to hypothyroidchef.com/membership. So check out the Thrivers Club today. Okay, back to the show. Okay, so now that I've thoroughly terrified you about how challenging AIP can be, we're going to talk about how we can make this work in real life. So, my top 10 AIP survival tips, all learned the hard way. So, hopefully, you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. All right, let's get right into it. Tip number 1, pick the right time. Timing is everything, and that is very true with AIP. So, if you can, of course, it depends on what your practitioner says, but if you can avoid starting during vacations or holidays or particularly stressful times in your life, do so. Like, you really want to set yourself up for success that way, not extra struggle. For me, I found January is like always a good time. It's just a sweet spot, right? The holidays are over. Things tend to be quieter socially. We're not traveling, after the holidays are done and we're kind of like hunkered down at home. And there's that natural like new year energy that makes those lifestyle changes just feel a bit more sparkly or more manageable even. September, I found, can also be a good time. That's when James is back in school. We're back to our routines. Summer, I've found, isn't a great time for me because when my kid is out of school, there tends to be more travel. We're socializing more. We're going on camping trips. There's house guests. We're visiting family. We're entertaining. There's more events, concerts, all kinds of things going on. Actually, just as I'm recording this, I'm thinking out loud here, like, when I talk to my naturopath next week about this upcoming gut reset, I should probably mention to her, like, we're coming up on summer. There's only a few more weeks till school's out. I should probably mention that summer isn't really the best time for me to do full-blown AIP. Like, maybe I could do a shorter stint, like 2 weeks on elimination phase AIP, and then like quickly shift to paleo or something, which is similar to AIP. It's also an anti-inflammatory and therapeutic protocol. It just has a little more wiggle room with things like nuts and seeds and spices. I'm like making mental notes on that in real time here, but this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say you need to have a game plan that's realistic for you and know yourself here. If you have what feels like a more ideal time in your mind or for, your particular life circumstances, go with that. The point is to be strategic and to choose a period of time when you're going to have the bandwidth to focus on what really is like a whole new way of eating. I would say take at least a week to wrap your head around it. Get your, don't just, leave the doctor's office when they say, "Oh, you should go on AIP for 30 days." It's like, give yourself a few days, at least a week, ideally. Wrap your head around it. Get your recipes in order. Find some meal planning resources. Prepare your family. Talk to your household members. Let them know that some changes are coming. Most of those changes are going to be temporary changes, but still, this isn't something you can just like do in the background without your family knowing about it. All right, tip number 2, batch cooking. This is your absolute BFF with AIP. I cannot stress this enough. Do not, I repeat, do not go into AIP thinking, "I'm just going to cook every meal from scratch." That is a fast track to burnout and overwhelm. Instead, if you just dedicate really like a few hours once or twice a week to prep and batch some basic staples, make a big pot of stew, roast a bunch of veggies that can be used in other dishes throughout the week, wash up some salad greens, maybe make a simple AIP friendly vinaigrette, cook up some extra protein like shredded chicken, maybe some seasoned grass finished beef. Those things can be added to a lot of different bowls, salads. Just having some AIP compliant food ready to go when that hunger strikes is a major game changer, because when you're starving and you don't have anything prepared, that's when we go off the rails. That's when willpower crumbles and those non-compliant convenience foods become really, really tempting. Kitchen burnout is real. I think it's one of the main reasons people tend to abandon AIP or just any kind of health goal prematurely. So those tools can be very, very helpful for just managing, the cooking part of it. This leads me to tip number 3, which is avoid the hangries. So in other words, don't let yourself get hungry if you can help it. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make on AIP is not eating enough. And you got to remember, AIP is not meant to be a calorie restriction diet. It's not a weight loss diet. It's about nourishing your body so it can heal. Your body needs those calories to heal, to regenerate, like gut tissue, for example. I just created a meal plan for one of my Thrivers Club members who's on AIP, and she isn't done on it yet. She wanted to stay on it for a while, but she's been losing weight unintentionally. And she wanted to stop that. So she was like, "Can you make this so that my meal plan is about 2,000 calories a day?" And you know what? It's actually pretty hard to hit that mark on AIP because the focus is so much on plant foods, which tend to be like, they can fill us up. There's so much good in them. They're so nutrient dense, right? But they're not always very calorie dense. Also, you're cutting out like all grain-based fillers. There's no melted cheese on top of anything. Like when you cut out so many food groups, it's really easy to just underfuel without even realizing it. But if you are consistently hungry and not eating enough, it will tank your energy. It will mess with your hormones. It will make the entire experience miserable. And it will actually get in the way of the healing that your body is trying to do. Your body is like, "Please keep feeding me all this good, nutrient dense, super clean food so that I can do let's like both like hold up our end of the bargain here." Your body wants to heal. You got to give it the right inputs. Right. So if you're on AIP, seriously, do yourself a favor, do your metabolism a favor, and eat. Try to make sure that you're getting enough sustenance. I learned to carry AIP compliant snacks everywhere I go. Just, a couple like things of like those epic bison bars are AIP compliant. Have a couple of those in my purse at all times. There's a couple different types of compliant jerky, some cut up veggies, little packages of olives, even little containers of leftovers, because once that serious hunger hits, it just becomes so much harder to stick with your goals. From a practical standpoint, I recommend trying to plan for 3 solid meals a day plus a snack or two. And always, have something, some kind of emergency compliant food options readily available, whether that's at home, at work, in your car, in your purse, whatever. Moving on, tip number 4, incorporate some AIP friendly treats. Deprivation is real, it's powerful. It can mess with your mind, it can mess with your attitude, it can mess with your joy. If you go into AIP thinking, I'm never going to have anything that feels remotely like a treat for weeks or months on end, you are setting yourself up for failure. And there's so many great AIP friendly treat recipes out there. You want to find and make some AIP compliant treats that are delicious and satisfying and aren't going to derail you from your goals. For me, some of my favorites are things like pumpkin spice cookies made with tiger nut flour, maybe even like frozen fruit smoothies made with coconut milk, some AIP tart cherry gels on the Hypothyroid Chef blog. There's other like AIP friendly sweets and treats recipes on there. But those little indulgences can just really help you feel like you're not completely missing out. And they can give you something to look forward to when those cravings hit. When they do hit, and they will, having those options ready really can be the difference between staying on track and jumping ship. I know that you already know that treats are treats. They're not meant to replace meals. They're not meant to replace nutrient-dense whole foods that support healing. A lot of AIP treats are made with nutrient-dense whole foods that support healing. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. These aren't like, they don't have to be guilty indulgences. You're not always doing something naughty, but treats do tend to be typically like higher in sugars, even if they're natural sugars. I just find that having some kind of treat on hand, even if it's stashed away in the freezer, maybe even especially if it's stashed away in the freezer, that can be a really powerful strategy to help you navigate those emotional aspects of such a restrictive diet. You don't have to forego all sweet treats during the entirety of your AIP elimination phase. They can absolutely be a part of it, and they can be a helpful strategy for helping you stick to it. All right, tip number 5, try not to overdo it on any one food. Like the first one that comes to mind, and if you've ever done AIP, you can probably guess what I'm going to say here, is coconut. That's a big one. And I kind of learned that the hard way. When you start AIP, coconut really becomes like one of your main staples. Coconut milk, coconut flour, coconut aminos, coconut oil, like it feels like it's in everything. But here's the catch. If we are limiting our diet and maybe overexposing ourselves to any food that can potentially lead to new sensitivities, that can be a problem. It can also just get kind of old and tiresome, like, not more coconut milk again. So just something to be mindful of when you're meal menu planning, selecting your recipes. Try and notice if some of those staple ingredients are showing up in like all 3 meals a day. It's a real easy one to happen on with AIP recipes when it comes to coconut products. One of my good friends and a fellow thyroid advocate, she's actually an AIP coach and a chef and a cookbook author. She wrote the AIP Reintroduction cookbook, Kate J. She ended up developing a sensitivity to coconut. I believe it was temporary, but it was a real bummer for her because her diet was already somewhat limited. So just remember that dietary diversity, as much as you can, as much dietary diversity as you can find during the elimination phase, is like an insurance policy. And this is also like why making reintroductions is so important too. We want that dietary diversity as much as we can, as much as, our bodies can tolerate and thrive on. We want to be eating, a wide variety of ingredients and whole foods. But so when you're on that more limited elimination diet, though, you can think about like just rotating your ingredients, like maybe use tiger nut flour sometimes instead of coconut flour, or green banana flour is another one you can try on AIP. You can try different fats like olive oil or avocado oil instead of always just reaching for the coconut oil, right? Variety is not just the spice of life. It truly is a protective strategy for your nutrition, for your body, for your health, for your immune system. And this concept of rotating foods really applies to everything on your plate, not just coconut. I use coconut as an example, but it could apply to other things, even like bone broth can become really prominent on an AIP diet. So aim for as much dietary diversity as the protocol allows, mix it up. And that's going to not only hopefully prevent potential new sensitivities, but also help ensure that you're getting the widest range of nutrients to support your body's healing. Okay, tip number 6, track everything. I know food journals, not everyone's favorite, but keeping a food and symptom journal during AIP can be incredibly helpful, especially when you get to the reintroduction phase. You don't need anything fancy, just a simple notebook or even like the notes app on your phone will do. And just record what you eat, when you eat it, and how you feel physically and emotionally throughout the day. And that information is going to be like gold during those reintroductions because you'll be able to clearly see patterns emerge. Maybe you'll notice that your energy is consistently dipping after eating a certain food, or that your sleep improves when you have a specific type of dinner. What symptoms should you track? Everything you notice, from digestive issues like bloating or changes in your bowel movements to less obvious reactions like joint pain or skin issues, headaches, mood changes, energy fluctuations, sleep disturbances. Food reactions are not always immediate, and it's surprising to a lot of people that they're not always digestive. They can be delayed by hours or even days, and they can affect pretty much any system in the body. In my Thrivers Club, I've created a special symptom tracker, a food sensitivity and symptom tracker that is specifically for this purpose. It's got a calendar, it's got like the before, during, and after columns, it's got the list of symptoms, just because it makes such a difference in understanding your body's responses when you have some kind of tracking system. It doesn't have to be complex, but tracking that data is part of being a good scientist so that you can get good results from your AIP experiment. All right, tip number 7, make sure you eat enough carbs. So this kind of goes back to like make sure you're eating enough, but carbs in particular, it can be easy to like unintentionally go low carb on AIP. And this was a big mistake that I made my first time around. I cut out, all the obvious carb sources like grains and legumes, but I wasn't really like thinking about it. I wasn't intentionally replacing those carbs with AIP compliant carbs. And the result is that eventually I started to crash. Like I was feeling so good at first. And then I started to feel like, why am I getting tired? And when I started reincorporating, like intentionally adding in more carbs, I felt better. So AIP is not meant to be a low carb or ketogenic diet. In fact, for many of us with thyroid issues, going too low carb can actually backfire and just stress the body further. So try to make sure that you are including plenty of like starchy vegetables, those complex carbohydrates, things like sweet potatoes, plantains, squash, beets, also some fruit. Your energy levels are going to thank you. And this is especially important for those of us with thyroid conditions because our metabolism needs proper carbohydrate intake to function optimally. All right, tip number 8, get support. This is such an overlooked one, and support is such an undervalued thing. And you know what? You can do AIP alone. It's possible, but it is so much harder than it needs to be. When you do it with a support system, whether that's a health coach, an online community, or even just a friend who's maybe done it before, it can make all the difference. So inside the Thrivers Club, we often have members going through AIP, at various times, but they can connect with one another. And just that camaraderie and shared experience are so invaluable. When you have that support community, you have people you can swap recipes, troubleshoot challenges, and celebrate with. And people tend to really, they underestimate how valuable that support is. But just having someone who genuinely understands what you're going through is incredibly validating. And it isn't just validating, it's motivating too. That social isolation aspect is real. And that can come from dietary restrictions. And, having a community that gets it can really transform your experience. It can take it from one of deprivation to one of empowerment and connection. So remember to give yourself the gift of support. All right, tip number 9. Remember and know that the elimination phase of AIP is not forever. This is crucial. It's not meant to be a lifelong diet. The goal is to eliminate potential triggers, allow your body time to heal, and then methodically reintroduce foods to discover your personal tolerance threshold for those foods. Now, the elimination phase typically lasts, I would say, 30 to 90 days. It depends on the person. Sometimes practitioners will recommend longer if someone needs, more intensive healing. Functional medicine actually suggests that as little as 21 days can be sufficient for some individuals. And they point out that it's kind of that sweet spot between this is as long as I can maintain this and stick with it and still get results and still calm inflammation and still have that reset where I can start from a clean slate with doing the reintroductions. But it is not meant to be forever, and reminding yourself of that when things get rough can be really helpful and important because you can do anything for 30 days, right? I remember telling myself that, like, I can do this. It's just 30 days, right? It was like a mantra. And as we touched on earlier, the reintroduction phase is really where the magic happens. That's where you're going to gain a lot of clarity about exactly which foods work for your unique body and which ones trigger your symptoms. The ultimate goal is really to create your personalized diet with as much variety as possible while avoiding only the foods that cause problems for you as an individual. And remember, staying on the elimination phase too long can actually be not just counterproductive, but it can become harmful. It can lead to increased food sensitivities. It can lead to potential nutrient deficiencies, social isolation, even food fear or disordered eating patterns like orthorexia. So that is a very real risk that we have to, kind of acknowledge here at the outset, that you really do want to go into this, with a clear plan and with understanding, like that elimination phase is not meant to be forever. What happens sometimes, I think, is, like some of these doctors are busy. They might just flippantly say, oh, do AIP. That'll help, your issues. Patients need more information. That's where health coaches and nutritionists and things can be really helpful in providing the more detailed information that you really need to not just do this successfully and sustainably, but also safely. Because some people go into it and they just think, oh, I'm supposed to be on AIP forever. They go on it. Maybe they feel so much better that then they're like afraid to start reintroducing foods. And then it's like, wait, what? I have to reintroduce things? What, yeah, yes. Don't start AIP without like some kind of a plan, or even if, that plan can change, right? We can change our plans depending on how you're doing, but you do need to have that in mind, that I am going to eventually start reintroducing foods so that you can identify your personalized dietary triggers and so you can enjoy the widest variety of foods possible that work for your body. All right. Last but not least, tip number 10, be kind. Be kind to yourself. This might be the most important tip of all that I can share with you. You will make mistakes. You might accidentally eat something that's non-compliant. You might consciously choose to, cheat on a special occasion. You might get frustrated and want to quit altogether some days. All of that's normal. You're human, you're healing, and healing is rarely a linear process. When I was too hard on myself during AIP, it actually just created more stress, which then ironically just triggered the inflammation that I was trying to reduce. So just learning to approach that process with self-compassion was a major game changer for me. There's science behind that too. Stress and negative self-talk can increase inflammation in the body. Another little trick, just a mindset trick, is saying I don't eat that instead of I can't eat that. Saying I don't eat that instead of I can't isn't just a psychological trick. Research actually shows that it can increase your likelihood of sticking to your health goals by over 80%. So how we speak to ourselves really matters, is the point that I want to get across to you here. And ultimately, just remember, it's progress over perfection, right? We talk about that all the time in the Thrivers Club. And I know these 10 tips aren't going to make AIP effortless, but they will make it a lot more manageable. And as we move into the end of the show, I want to talk about something that goes hand in hand with these practical strategies. Is AIP right for you? So that's where we're going to end today. After everything we've discussed, the challenges, the strategies, the mindset, you might be wondering, is AIP actually right for me? And that is the million-dollar question, because while AIP can be really powerful, it's not the right starting point for everyone, even everyone with an autoimmune condition. So let's talk about when AIP might not be the best approach, at least not right away. So first, if you have a history of disordered eating or maybe some issues within your relationship with food, AIP can potentially trigger those patterns. And the restrictive nature of the diet, the focus on food rules, the food tracking, journaling, the emphasis on, eat this, not that, that can all be problematic for someone who has that history. So in those cases, working with both a qualified nutritionist and a therapist who specializes in disordered eating is really crucial before you attempt something like AIP. Second, if you're currently under some major life stress, maybe you're planning a wedding, maybe you're moving homes, maybe you're starting a new job or caring for a new baby, adding the complexity of AIP might be more harmful than helpful at those times. Remember, stress itself is inflammatory, so timing matters. Third, if you have other complex health conditions that require specific dietary approaches, like SIBO comes to mind, for example, like SIBO and low FODMAP kind of go hand in hand, or some people have histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome where they need to avoid histamines. Those individuals might need a modified version of AIP or a completely different protocol altogether, because those conditions often require more specialized dietary approaches that don't always align perfectly with standard AIP. So it isn't the right fit for 100% of people. Of course, it's not. No diet is, right? And finally, if you are severely nutritionally depleted or underweight, the elimination aspect of AIP can further compromise that nutritional status. So in those cases, really focusing on nutrient density and gut healing while also working with a healthcare practitioner might be more appropriate before diving into the elimination phase of AIP. Now, let's flip the coin. When might AIP might be particularly beneficial? AIP can be a great fit if you've been managing your autoimmune condition for a while with a lot of, food and lifestyle interventions, but you're still having persistent symptoms or elevated antibodies. It can be helpful if you maybe feel like food sensitivities are a factor, but you're not sure exactly which foods are the problem for you. It can be a good fit for people who might be experiencing a lot of inflammation, digestive issues, skin problems, along with other autoimmune symptoms. It can be helpful for those who have maybe hit a plateau in their healing journey and just need a reset. Another factor that can make it a good fit is if you have the bandwidth and resources and support to commit to the protocol properly. In my experience, AIP tends to be most successful when it's approached as one tool in a more comprehensive healing strategy, not as a silver bullet, not as a standalone approach. The people that I've seen have the most success with AIP are those who are combining it with other foundational practices like optimizing sleep quality and quantity, managing stress, by, practicing self-care, mindfulness, gentle movement, relaxation techniques, addressing gut health with the guidance of a knowledgeable practitioner, working with a healthcare provider to monitor your thyroid levels and adjust and optimize your medication as needed, building strong social connections, having a sense of purpose beyond just your health journey. When all of those elements come together, that's where the magic happens. That's where we find the sustainable path. That's where we start really feeling results, and we're also enjoying the journey. And we're not just on this, I'm going to do this protocol for X number of days. I know what I'm doing here. And that's that I'm actually moving towards a personalized way of eating and living that serves and supports my body rather than suppresses it, rather than harms it, rather than, is a hindrance to my health. I have had members in the Thrivers Club who have seen dramatic reductions in antibody levels. I have experienced that myself through the help of food and lifestyle changes, including AIP. I've seen significant improvements like across the board in terms of energy and brain fog, and even sometimes just complete resolution of major issues, skin issues, sleep issues, joint pain through AIP. Again, it's not for everyone. It doesn't always work for everyone. There might be individual factors that come into play that make it not the best fit. But, the key is just to remember that everyone's journey looks different. Some people find that they might need to be really strict with their food eliminations for a long time, and other people might find that they can pretty quickly reintroduce and tolerate a lot of foods with just, a few key exceptions. Some people find that certain AIP principles, like emphasizing nutrient density and minimizing processed foods, are what really make the difference for them. And those are foundational AIP principles. Those are the things that we are supposed to adopt on a more permanent basis because they're so good for us. This is like, there's mountains of evidence about things like just eating real foods, eating more vegetables. These things are good for us. So the beauty of AIP is that it's not actually prescribing a one-size-fits-all diet that's meant to be forever. What it's ultimately doing is providing a framework to enable you to discover your unique needs. That is the ultimate goal of AIP. So if you're considering AIP, I encourage you to approach it not as this rigid protocol that's either going to work or not work, but more as like an investigative process. This is a way to gather data about your unique body and what it actually needs to thrive. And remember, you don't have to go it alone. Which brings me to our final takeaway for today: how to take the next step on your AIP journey. So if you're ready to give AIP a try, my best advice to you is to get support. Inside the Thrivers Club, I provide structured guidance, meal plans, recipe collections, a community of people who truly understand the unique challenges of navigating autoimmunity and thyroid conditions. We run regular wellness challenges where members can go through the protocol together. They can share their experiences. They can have extra motivation, support, rewards, wellness prizes. We try to make it as fun as possible. And people can just support each other and share in each other's wins and, lift each other up through the bumpier parts of the road. And that shared experience can just make all the difference between giving up when things get tough or finding the motivation to keep going. I think it can also help avoid a lot of common pitfalls of AIP. And as you heard today, I've made most of those mistakes myself. So hopefully you don't have to. I'll leave you with this final thought today. Finding the balance between diligence and flexibility, between health optimization and genuine enjoyment of your life, that is the real secret to sustainable healing. That is the ultimate end goal of all of these different tools in our Thrivers toolboxes. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Drop me a comment if you're watching on YouTube. You can send me a DM on Instagram at hypothyroidchef, or you can get my personal support for your AIP journey inside the Thrivers Club. We thrive best when we thrive together, and together we can find joy in the journey. Thanks so much for spending this time with me and tuning into today's episode of the Thyroid-Healthy Bites podcast. If you've enjoyed today's show, please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. Your support makes this show possible. For more thyroid healthy food and lifestyle inspiration, check out my free library of thyroid-friendly recipes and lifestyle content at hypothyroidchef.com and the Hypothyroid Chef YouTube channel. As we wrap it up, head to the show notes for information and links to everything we talked about today, along with the link to my free thyroid-friendly grocery guide download. I'm Ginny Mahar, your thyroid health and cooking coach, wishing you happy cooking, happy thriving, and the best of health. See you next time.